I'll never forget the look on Ernest's face when Dr. Akintola stood up in that courtroom and said, "Your Honor, I need to correct something very important here." My husband's lawyer had just spent 20 minutes painting me as a dying woman who couldn't possibly manage her own affairs, let alone the assets from our 42-year marriage. Ernest sat there nodding along, looking all concerned and caring, like he was doing me some kind of favor by trying to take everything I'd worked for. Mrs. Vivian Hayes is not the frail, terminally ill woman being described here, Dr. Akintola continued, holding up a folder of papers. In fact, her most recent test results tell a completely different story. Ernest's face went from confident to confused to pure panic in about 3 seconds flat. His lawyer, some slick-talking man in an expensive suit, jumped up and started objecting, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. "I'd very much like to hear what the doctor has to say," she said, looking at Ernest over her glasses in a way that made him shrink in his seat. "But let me back up and tell you how I ended up in that courtroom in the first place, watching my husband of 4 decades try to rob me blind. Before we continue, shout out to Keisha from Atlanta. We appreciate the love you show by commenting and sharing. It started 6 months ago on a Tuesday morning. I remember because Tuesdays were my volunteer day at the church food pantry. I'd been feeling tired for a few weeks, more than usual, and I kept getting these headaches that wouldn't quit. Being 71 years old, you start to worry about every little thing your body does. So I finally made an appointment with Dr. Akintola. He's a good man, that doctor. Been taking care of me for 15 years, ever since old Dr. Patterson retired. Dr. Akintola always takes his time, never rushes you out the door like you're just a number. When he called me back in after running some tests, something in his voice made my stomach drop. "Vivian, I need to run some more tests," he said carefully. "Some of your blood work came back with numbers that concern me. There's a possibility of a serious condition, but I don't want to jump to conclusions." The words "serious condition" were all Ernest needed to hear. I made the mistake of telling him everything when I got home that day. We were sitting in the kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd raised our 3 children, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and every milestone you could think of. I thought after 42 years of marriage, I could lean on him. "They think it might be something with my blood," I told him, my voice shaking. Dr. Akintola used some medical terms I didn't fully understand, but he said we need to do more testing. He mentioned the word cancer as one possibility. Ernest got real quiet, not the supportive kind of quiet where someone's processing how to help you. It was a calculating kind of quiet. I should have recognized it then, but I was too scared and too trusting. "Don't worry, baby," he finally said, patting my hand in this absent-minded way. "I'm sure it'll be fine." But he didn't ask me any questions, didn't offer to come to my next appointment, didn't even hug me. He just patted my hand and went to his office, saying he had some paperwork to handle. Over the next few weeks, while I was going through test after test, dealing with the fear and uncertainty, Ernest became distant. He started spending more time out of the house, said he was meeting up with his old work buddies, playing golf, running errands. Meanwhile, I was calling our kids, trying to stay positive, going to church and praying, talking to my best friend Dolores about my fears. Then came the appointment where Dr. Akintola sat me down with a serious look on his face. "Vivian, based on the preliminary results, it looks like we might be dealing with a rare blood disorder. It could be very serious. I need to run one more comprehensive panel to be absolutely certain, but I wanted you to be aware of what we're potentially facing." My heart felt like it stopped. A blood disorder, potentially very serious. Those words echoed in my head all the way home. I could barely see straight as I drove, tears streaming down my face. When I got home, Ernest was in the living room watching television. "They think it's bad," I told him, my voice breaking. "Ernest, they think I might be really sick." He looked at me for a long moment, and I swear I saw something cold flicker in his eyes before he put on what I now know was a mask of concern. "That's terrible news, Vivian," he said. "Just terrible." The next morning, I woke up to find Ernest already dressed in his good suit, the one he wore to important occasions. "Where are you going?" I asked, confused. "I have some business to take care of," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up for me." He didn't come home until late that evening. When he did, he handed me a manila envelope. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were divorce papers. "Ernest, what is this?" I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "I just told you yesterday that I might be dying, and you're serving me with divorce papers?" "It's for the best, Vivian," he said, still not looking at me directly. "We've grown apart. This isn't working anymore. It's better to make a clean break now." "A clean break?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I've been with you for 42 years. I stood by you when you got laid off from the factory. I worked 2 jobs to help pay for the kids' college. I took care of your mother when she got sick. And now when I need you most, you're leaving?" "My lawyer says it's a straightforward case," he continued, like he hadn't heard a word I said. "We'll split everything 50-50. You'll be taken care of." That's when it clicked. 50-50. He wanted half of everything. But most of our assets were in my name. The house was mine, inherited from my parents. The savings account was primarily funded by my work as a school administrator for 30 years. The investment accounts were mine. Ernest had worked, sure, but he'd also had a gambling problem for years that I'd covered up and paid off quietly. He'd made bad business decisions that I'd bailed him out of. Most of what we had was because of me, and he knew it. He wasn't leaving me because we'd grown apart. He was leaving me because he thought I was dying, and this was his chance to grab half of everything before I either got too sick to fight, or before I died and he got nothing. The cruelty of it took my breath away. This man I'd loved, built a life with, shared a bed with for over 4 decades was willing to abandon me in my darkest hour just to get his hands on money. I called our kids that night through my tears. Our daughter, Clarissa, cried with me. Our older son, Jerome, was furious. But our youngest, Marcus, was quiet. "Maybe Dad has a point," Marcus finally said. "Maybe it is time for you two to split up. And honestly, Mom, if you're sick, you probably need to think about getting your affairs in order, making sure everything's distributed fairly." Fairly? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Marcus, your father is abandoning me when I might be dying. I'm just saying, try to see it from his perspective. He's got to think about his future too." After I hung up, Dolores came over and held me while I cried. "That man is lower than low," she said, "and Marcus should be ashamed of himself for taking his daddy's side." The divorce proceedings started fast. Ernest's lawyer painted a picture of a long, struggling marriage that had finally reached its end. They made it sound so reasonable, so mutual. But I knew the truth, and I couldn't prove it. How do you prove someone's timing? How do you prove malicious intent? Then Ernest's lawyer started pushing a narrative that made me sick. They claimed that due to my failing health, I wasn't capable of making sound financial decisions. They argued that Ernest should get more than half because I wouldn't need it for much longer anyway, and he had to plan for his future. They actually said that, in legal documents. My dying was factored into their calculations. My lawyer, Tamara Jenkins, a sharp young woman from my church, was furious. "This is unconscionable," she said. "But we need to be strategic. We need to prove his intent, his timing, everything." While all this was happening, I was still waiting for my final test results. Dr. Akintola had said it would take a few weeks for the comprehensive panel to come back. Meanwhile, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. My husband was trying to rob me, my youngest son was taking his side, and I still didn't know if I was dying or not. The courtroom proceedings began before my test results came back. Ernest's lawyer was aggressive, painting me as a sick, confused old woman who couldn't possibly manage a household budget, let alone significant assets. He brought up every time I'd forgotten to pay a bill on time, every instance where I'd spent money on what he called frivolous things like gifts for my grandchildren or donations to the church. Mrs. Hayes is clearly not in her right mind, his lawyer argued. Her illness has compromised her judgment. Mr. Hayes is simply trying to protect the assets they built together and ensure his financial security for his remaining years. I sat there in that courtroom, listening to them tear apart my character, my competence, my entire life, and I felt smaller and smaller. Ernest wouldn't even look at me. He sat there playing the concerned, reluctant husband who was only doing what was necessary. Then Tamara stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Chidi Akintola to the stand. Ernest's lawyer objected immediately. Relevance, Your Honor. Mrs. Hayes's medical condition has already been established through submitted documentation. I think Dr. Akintola's testimony is very relevant, Tamara said calmly, especially regarding the timeline of Mrs. Hayes's diagnosis and Mr. Hayes's filing for divorce. Judge Morrison allowed it, and Dr. Akintola was called in. He'd been waiting outside, and when he walked in carrying that folder, I saw Ernest shift uncomfortably in his seat. That's when Dr. Akintola stood up and said those words that changed everything. Your Honor, I need to correct something very important here. And Ernest's face went pale as paper. Doctor. Akintola opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. I received Mrs. Hayes's comprehensive test results 3 days ago, he said, his voice clear and steady. The initial tests that raised concerns were, as I suspected might be the case, indicative of a temporary condition caused by a medication interaction and stress. The comprehensive panel I ordered came back completely clear. The courtroom went dead silent. What are you saying, Doctor? Judge Morrison asked, leaning forward. I'm saying that Mrs. Vivian Hayes is in excellent health for a woman of her age. There is no blood disorder, there is no cancer, there is no terminal or serious illness whatsoever. The symptoms that prompted the initial testing have completely resolved. Mrs. Hayes is, by all medical standards, a healthy 71-year-old woman who can expect many more years of normal life. I watched Ernest's face crumble. His lawyer started shuffling papers frantically, whispering urgently to him, but it was too late. The truth was out. Dr. Akintola, Tamara said, standing up with a slight smile. When did Mr. Hayes file for divorce in relation to Mrs. Hayes's medical timeline? According to the dates I have here, Mrs. Hayes came to me with concerns on March 15th. I informed her of the possibility of a serious condition on March 22nd. Mr. Hayes filed for divorce on March 23rd. Exactly 1 day after she received the preliminary concerning diagnosis. And he did so 3 weeks before the comprehensive test results that would clear her were even available. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. So, Mr. Hayes filed for divorce believing his wife was seriously ill, possibly dying, and did so at the precise moment when she would be most vulnerable and least able to fight for her rights? That appears to be the timeline, Your Honor, Dr. Akintola confirmed. Ernest finally found his voice. I didn't know about any of this. Vivian never told me the details. That's a lie! I stood up, my voice ringing through the courtroom. Tamara gently pulled me back down, but I wasn't done. I told you everything, Ernest. I came home crying and told you they thought it might be cancer. I told you about every appointment, every test, every fear I had, and you couldn't wait to get me served with papers. Mrs. Hayes, please, Judge Morrison said, but her tone wasn't unkind. Mr. Hayes, is it true that your wife informed you of her potentially serious diagnosis? Ernest's lawyer whispered something to him, but Ernest was rattled. She mentioned being sick, but I didn't realize. You didn't realize it was serious enough to wait a few weeks before destroying your marriage? Judge Morrison's voice was ice cold. Or did you realize it was serious enough that you needed to act quickly before she potentially died, and you lost your chance at her assets? The courtroom erupted. Ernest's lawyer was objecting. My lawyer was presenting evidence. And I just sat there feeling vindicated and heartbroken all at once. This man I'd loved for 42 years had shown me exactly who he was, and it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. Judge Morrison called for a recess, and I stumbled out into the hallway with Tamara and Dolores, who'd been sitting in the gallery. Dolores wrapped me in her arms. "That sorry excuse for a man," she muttered. "I hope the judge throws the book at him." But then I saw Marcus coming toward me, and my heart sank. My youngest son looked angry. "Mom, you made Dad look terrible in there," he said. "Was that really necessary? Bringing the doctor in like that?" I stared at him. "Marcus, your father tried to divorce me and take half of everything I own because he thought I was dying. He abandoned me when I needed him most. And you're worried about how he looks?" "He's still my father. And honestly, Mom, you have to see this from his side. He's been married to you for over 40 years. Don't you think he deserves something for that?" "He would have gotten something," I said, my voice shaking. "If he'd stayed. If he'd supported me. If he'd been the husband he promised to be. But he chose money over me. He chose greed over 42 years of marriage." Marcus shook his head. "I just think you're being dramatic. You're fine now, right? So what's the big deal?" Clarissa, who'd arrived during the recess, overheard this and pushed past me to get in Marcus's face. "The big deal? The big deal is that Daddy was willing to kick Mama when she was down. He thought she was dying, Marcus. And instead of holding her hand, he was trying to rob her." "Stay out of this, Clarissa," Marcus snapped. "No, you stay out of this. What's wrong with you? Are you so worried about your inheritance that you've forgotten Mama is a human being who deserves respect?" That hit me like a punch to the gut. The inheritance. That's what this was about for Marcus. He was worried that if Ernest didn't get anything, there would be less for him and his siblings later. "Is that what this is?" I asked quietly. "You're worried about money?" Marcus had the decency to look ashamed, but he didn't back down. "I'm just saying, it wouldn't kill you to be fair to Dad." Jerome arrived then, breathless from rushing over during his lunch break from the auto shop. He took one look at the situation and grabbed Marcus by the arm. "We need to talk. Now." They walked off, with Clarissa following, leaving me with Dolores and Tamara in the courthouse hallway. I felt like my whole family was falling apart. "Vivian," Tamara said gently, "I need to prepare you for what's coming. Ernest's lawyer is going to try to salvage this. They're going to argue that his timing was coincidental, that the marriage was already failing, anything they can think of. We need to stay strong and focused." When we went back into the courtroom, Ernest looked like a beaten man, but his lawyer had regrouped. "Your Honor, while the timing may look suspicious, my client maintains that the marriage had been struggling for years. The medical situation was simply the catalyst for a decision that had been building for a long time." "Then why didn't he file before?" Tamara countered. "Why wait until the exact day after his wife received devastating news? And why argue that she's incompetent to manage her assets due to an illness that doesn't exist?" Judge Morrison held up her hand. "I'm going to need to review all the evidence presented today. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning." "But I want to say this now, Mr. Hayes." She looked directly at Ernest. "If I determine that you filed for divorce with the intent to exploit what you believed was your wife's terminal condition, I will take that into consideration in my ruling. This court does not look kindly on predatory behavior." Ernest left the courthouse looking defeated, but as I watched him go, I saw him on his phone, talking animatedly to someone. He wasn't done fighting yet. That evening, I was at home, trying to process everything, when my doorbell rang. It was Pastor Williams from church, along with 3 of the deacons. "Sister Vivian," Pastor Williams said warmly, "we heard about what happened in court today. The whole church is praying for you, and we want you to know you're not alone in this fight." They came in, and we sat in my living room, the same room where Ernest and I had hosted Bible study groups and church socials for decades. Pastor Williams prayed over me, and the deacons promised their support. "That man should be ashamed," Deacon Carver said, "trying to take advantage of you like that. We've known you and Ernest for 20 years, and I can tell you right now the whole congregation is on your side." After they left, Clarissa came by with her 2 kids, my grandchildren. Jada was 15 and Khalil was 12, and they both hugged me tight. "Grandma, Uncle Marcus is being stupid," Jada said bluntly. "Don't listen to him. What Grandpa did was wrong." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Even my teenage granddaughter could see what my grown son couldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I'd been through with Ernest, yeah. The good times and the bad. The struggles and the triumphs. Had any of it been real? Had he ever really loved me? Or had I just been convenient? My phone buzzed around midnight. It was a text from an unknown number. "Drop the case and settle quietly, or things will get worse for you. Ernest has more evidence than you think." My hands shook as I read it. Was Ernest threatening me now? I forwarded the text to Tamara immediately. She called me back within minutes. "Vivian, this is intimidation. We're going to report this to the judge. This helps our case, actually. It shows consciousness of guilt." The next morning, back in court, Tamara presented the text message. Ernest's lawyer denied any knowledge of it, but the damage was done. Judge Morrison was clearly not pleased. Then Ernest's lawyer played his next card. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Marcus Hayes to the stand." My heart stopped. They were going to use my own son against me. Marcus took the stand looking uncomfortable but determined. Ernest's lawyer started asking him questions about our family dynamics, about my relationship with Ernest, about my spending habits and decision-making. "Would you say your mother has always been good with money?" the lawyer asked. Marcus hesitated. She's made some questionable decisions over the years." "Such as?" "She's given a lot of money to the church, and to other family members. She bailed out my Uncle Raymond twice when his business was failing. She's always helping people, sometimes when they don't deserve it. So she has a pattern of making emotional, rather than logical financial decisions?" "Objection!" Tamara was on her feet. Counsel is leading the witness and mischaracterizing charitable giving as incompetence. But the damage was being done. My own son was sitting there helping his father's case, making me sound like I couldn't manage money. Then Tamara cross-examined him. "Marcus, did your mother's financial help allow you to go to college without debt?" "Yes, but—" "And when you wanted to start your business 5 years ago, who gave you the initial investment?" "Mom did, but—" "And that business is now successful and profitable, correct?" "Yes." "So your mother's questionable financial decisions included investing in you and your success?" Marcus looked down. "I guess so." "One more question, Marcus. When did your father first talk to you about the divorce?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I don't remember exactly. Let me refresh your memory. According to phone records we've obtained, your father called you the same day he filed for divorce. What did he say to you in that conversation?" He said he needed to look out for himself, that Mom would be taken care of, but he needed to make sure he had something for his future." "Did he mention your mother's diagnosis?" "He said she was sick and that things were going to get complicated." "And after that conversation, did your father promise you anything? Perhaps a portion of what he hoped to gain from the divorce?" The courtroom went silent. Marcus's face went red. "Answer the question, please," Judge Morrison said sternly. He said that when things were settled, he'd make sure I was taken care of, that there would be enough for everyone." I felt sick. Ernest had bought Marcus's loyalty with promises of money. My youngest son had sold me out for his father's silver tongue and empty promises. Judge Morrison called another recess, and I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I'd lost everything that mattered. My marriage was over, my son had betrayed me, and my whole life had been torn apart and examined in public. But Dolores grabbed my hand in the hallway. "You listen to me, Vivian Hayes. You are stronger than all of this. That man in there, and that foolish boy you raised, they don't define you. You've got people who love you, people who see the truth, and you've got right on your side." Jerome and Clarissa came over, both looking furious at their brother. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Jerome said. "I can't believe Marcus did that." "He's going to regret it," Clarissa added. "When this is over and Dad has nothing, Marcus is going to realize he backed the wrong horse." But I wasn't thinking about revenge or about winning anymore. I was thinking about how easily the people you love can turn on you when money's involved. How quickly 42 years of marriage could dissolve into greed and cruelty. How a son could choose his father's promises over his mother's dignity. We went back into the courtroom for the final session of the day. Judge Morrison looked at both parties with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm going to take the weekend to review all testimony and evidence," she said. "We'll reconvene Monday morning for my ruling. But I want to say this to everyone in this room. This case has shown me some of the worst of human nature. Greed, betrayal, manipulation, and exploitation. I will be taking all of it into account." As we left the courthouse, I saw Ernest talking to Marcus in the parking lot. They were both looking at something on Ernest's phone, and they were smiling. Whatever they were planning, whatever evidence they thought they had, they looked confident. That's when my phone rang. It was Dr. Akintola. "Mrs. Hayes, I need to tell you something important. Someone from your husband's legal team called my office today asking for your medical records. When my staff refused, they threatened to subpoena them. But here's the thing. They specifically asked about records from 2019. I checked, and in 2019, you were treated for severe anxiety and depression after your mother passed away. I think they're going to try to paint you as mentally unstable." My blood ran cold. Ernest was going to dig up the hardest time of my life, when I'd grieved my mother and needed help, and use it against me in court. "Dr. Akintola, I was depressed because my mother died," I said, my voice shaking. "That's normal grief, isn't it?" "Of course it is. And I'll testify to that if needed. But Vivian, you need to be prepared. They're going to fight dirty." After I hung up, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot and cried. Not just for my marriage or my son's betrayal, but for every woman who'd ever trusted the wrong man, who'd ever been betrayed by her own family, who'd ever had her pain weaponized against her. Dolores knocked on my car window. "Come on, honey. You're coming home with me tonight. You're not staying in that house alone." I went to Dolores's house, and she made me tea and let me cry until I couldn't cry anymore. Her husband, Lloyd, who'd been friends with Ernest for years, was disgusted by the whole thing. "I always thought Ernest was a decent man," Lloyd said, shaking his head. "But this is lower than low. He's shown his true colors, and they're ugly as sin." That night, lying in Dolores's guest room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Ernest break me. I wasn't going to let Marcus's betrayal destroy me. I was going to fight, not just for my money or my house, but for my dignity and my right to be treated with respect after 42 years of loyalty and love. But I had no idea that when Monday morning came, Ernest's lawyer would present evidence that would shake the courtroom to its core. Evidence that would make me question everything I thought I knew about my own marriage. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I barely slept, my mind racing through every possible scenario. What evidence did Ernest have? What else was he going to try to use against me? The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through the church community, and I saw familiar faces filling the gallery. Members of my Bible study group, women from the auxiliary, even some of the youth I'd mentored over the years. Their presence gave me strength. Ernest's lawyer stood up with a smug expression. "Your Honor, we have evidence that will demonstrate a pattern of unstable behavior and poor judgment from Mrs. Hayes that goes back years." He projected images on a screen, screenshots of my bank statements showing donations to various charities and family members. As you can see, Mrs. Hayes has given away over $60,000 in the past 5 years to various individuals and organizations. This shows a reckless disregard for financial security and an inability to make sound decisions. Tamara stood immediately. "Your Honor, Charitable giving is not evidence of incompetence. Mrs. Hayes has consistently maintained a healthy savings account, owned her home outright, and built a substantial retirement fund. Her generosity did not compromise her financial stability. But Ernest's lawyer wasn't done. We also have medical records from 2019 showing that Mrs. Hayes was treated for depression and anxiety. She was on medication for over a year. This raises questions about her mental fitness to manage assets. I heard gasps from the gallery, but I held my head high. I wasn't ashamed of grieving my mother or getting help when I needed it. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, we have testimony from neighbors indicating that Mrs. Hayes has been showing signs of forgetfulness, misplacing keys, forgetting appointments, repeating conversations. Your Honor, Tamara interjected, this is a smear campaign, pure and simple. Everyone occasionally forgets where they put their keys. That's not evidence of incompetence, that's evidence of being human. Judge Morrison held up her hand. I've heard enough. Does the defense have any witnesses to call? Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to call Dolores Whitfield to the stand. Dolores walked up with her head high, looking directly at Ernest with contempt. After she was sworn in, Tamara began. Mrs. Whitfield, how long have you known Vivian Hayes? 35 years. We met when our kids were in elementary school together. In all that time, have you ever had concerns about her mental fitness or judgment? Never. Vivian is one of the sharpest, kindest, most capable women I know. She ran the school district's budget office for over a decade without a single error. She raised 3 children while working full-time. She's taken care of everyone around her, sometimes to her own detriment. Were you aware of Mr. Hayes's gambling problem? Ernest's face went white. His lawyer jumped up. Objection! Relevance! I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Answer the question, Mrs. Whitfield. Yes, I knew about it. Ernest gambled away over $30,000 about 15 years ago. Vivian paid off his debts and never told their children because she didn't want to shame him. She protected him, even when it cost her. And, did Mr. Hayes show appreciation for this? He promised to change. He went to Gamblers Anonymous for about 6 months, then stopped going. And about 5 years later, Vivian had to bail him out again when he got into debt with some loan sharks. That time it was close to $20,000. The courtroom buzzed. This was information even I hadn't known was going to come out. Tamara had done her homework. So while Mr. Hayes is claiming that Mrs. Hayes is financially irresponsible, the truth is she's been covering his financial irresponsibility for decades? Objection! Ernest's lawyer was red in the face. Sustained, Judge Morrison said, but the point had been made. Move on, counselor. Tamara then called Jerome to the stand. My son looked at his father with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure disappointment. Jerome, what's your relationship with your mother like? She's my hero, he said simply. She worked 2 jobs to put me through automotive technical school. When I wanted to open my own shop, she co-signed my loan when no bank would give me a chance. She's the reason I have a successful business today. And your father? Jerome paused. My father is the reason my mother had to work so hard. Every time he had a business opportunity that failed, every time he made a bad decision, Mom was there to fix it. She held our family together. Ernest's lawyer tried to discredit Jerome on cross-examination, but it didn't work. My son was calm and factual, and every word he said was true. Then Tamara called Clarissa. Miss Hayes, you're a CPA, is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Have you ever reviewed your mother's financial records? Many times. She asks me to look over her taxes every year and to help her with investment decisions. Her finances are impeccable. She has excellent credit, substantial savings, and a diversified investment portfolio. If anything, she's been too conservative with her money, not too reckless. And her charitable giving? It's all documented, all legitimate, and it has never endangered her financial security. My mother gives because she believes in helping others, but she's always smart about it. When Ernest's lawyer tried to cross-examine, Clarissa shut him down with facts and figures that made it clear I was more than capable of managing my own affairs. Then Tamara did something unexpected. She called Ernest to the stand. "Mr. Hayes, when exactly did you decide to divorce your wife?" "We'd been having problems for years," he said, sticking to his script. "Then why did you wait until March 23rd to file? Why not February? Why not January? Why that specific day?" Ernest stumbled. It was time. It was one day after your wife received news that she might be terminally ill. That's quite a coincidence, isn't it? I didn't know she was that sick. But you just testified that she told you everything. Which is it, Mr. Hayes? Did she tell you, or didn't she? Ernest's face turned red. She told me. But I didn't realize. You didn't realize it was the perfect time to file for divorce while she was vulnerable and scared? You didn't realize that if she died, you'd get nothing as an ex-husband, but if you filed while she was alive and sick, you could claim she was incompetent and take half of everything? That's not what I was thinking. Then what were you thinking? Help us understand why a man would abandon his wife of 42 years at the exact moment she needed him most. Ernest had no good answer. He fumbled and contradicted himself, and with each word, he buried himself deeper. One more question, Mr. Hayes. How much did you promise your son Marcus if he testified on your behalf? I didn't promise him anything. So he testified out of the goodness of his heart? Or did you tell him, as phone records indicate, that there would be enough for everyone once you got what you deserved from the divorce? Ernest's lawyer objected, but it was too late. The truth was painted clearly for everyone to see. Judge Morrison called for a brief recess, and when we came back, she had a stack of papers in front of her. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented in this case, she began, and I have rarely seen such a clear-cut example of predatory behavior disguised as a legitimate divorce proceeding. Ernest's face went pale. Mr. Hayes, you filed for divorce exactly one day after your wife received news of a potentially terminal illness. You then attempted to argue that she was mentally and financially incompetent to manage her own affairs, despite decades of evidence to the contrary. You brought up medical records from a period of grief-related depression as if seeking help for mental health was a sign of weakness rather than strength. You enlisted your own son to testify against his mother by promising him financial reward. And throughout all of this, you have shown not 1 ounce of remorse or recognition of how cruel your actions have been. The judge paused, looking directly at Ernest. The evidence shows that Mrs. Hayes is, and has always been, the financial backbone of this marriage. She has covered your debts, protected your reputation, and maintained the household while you made poor decision after poor decision. And when she was at her most vulnerable, you saw an opportunity to finally take what you couldn't earn on your own. Your Honor, please, Ernest started, but Judge Morrison cut him off. I'm not finished. This court finds that the marriage between Ernest and Vivian Hayes is irretrievably broken, and I am granting the divorce. However, based on the evidence of Mr. Hayes's predatory timing and intent, as well as Mrs. Hayes's sole financial responsibility throughout the marriage, I am awarding Mrs. Vivian Hayes 100% of all marital assets. The courtroom erupted. Ernest's lawyer was on his feet, objecting, but Judge Morrison kept talking. Furthermore, Mr. Hayes will receive nothing except his personal belongings and his vehicle. Mrs. Hayes will retain the house, all savings and investment accounts, and all other property. Mr. Hayes is also ordered to pay Mrs. Hayes's legal fees in full as punishment for bringing this frivolous and malicious case to court. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd expected to have to give Ernest something, anything, but the judge had seen through him completely. Mr. Hayes, Judge Morrison continued, you tried to exploit your wife's fear and vulnerability for financial gain. This court will not reward such behavior. Case closed. Ernest sat there in shock. His lawyer was arguing, filing motions, but it was over. I'd won. Not just legally, but morally, completely. As I walked out of that courtroom, the church members in the gallery stood and applauded. Dolores was crying happy tears. Jerome and Clarissa hugged me tight. "Mama, I'm so proud of you," Clarissa whispered. "You stood up for yourself." But then I saw Marcus standing off to the side, looking lost. He approached slowly. "Mom, he started. "Not now, Marcus," Jerome said sharply. "You made your choice." "Let him speak," I said quietly. Marcus looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I was wrong. I thought Dad was right. He convinced me that you were being unfair to him, that he deserved something after all these years. He promised me that there would be money for all of us if I helped him. But I see now what he really is. And I see what I did to you. I'm so sorry, Mama." I looked at my youngest son, the baby I'd rocked and raised, and I saw the shame on his face. Part of me wanted to hold him and tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. "Marcus, you chose money over me. You chose your father's lies over the woman who gave you everything. I forgive you because that's what mothers do. But trust? Respect? That you're going to have to earn back. And it's going to take a long time." Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." "Start by being a better man than your father," I said. "That's all I ask." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Apparently, word had spread about the case. One of them pushed a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Hayes, how does it feel to win?" I thought about it for a moment. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. Winning would have been having a husband who loved me enough to stay. But I'll take survival over betrayal any day. Over the next few weeks, Ernest moved out of the house. He'd been living with a friend since the divorce proceedings started, but now it was final. He came to collect his belongings on a Saturday morning, and I watched from the window as he packed his car. He looked older, defeated. Part of me felt sorry for him. 42 years of marriage, and it had come down to this: him loading boxes into a car, leaving behind the home we'd built together. But then I remembered the look on his face when he'd handed me those divorce papers. The cold calculation. The willingness to destroy me when I was at my lowest. And the pity faded. Dolores came over that afternoon with a bottle of wine and her famous peach cobbler. "Honey, you survived. That's worth celebrating." "I don't feel much like celebrating," I admitted. "My marriage is over, my son betrayed me, and I'm starting over at 71 years old." "Starting over?" Dolores laughed. "Vivian, you're not starting over, you're starting fresh. There's a difference. You've got your health, your home, your money, and your freedom. That man was holding you back for years, and you just never saw it." She was right. Over the next few months, I started to see how much of my life had been built around Ernest's needs and wants. How many of my dreams I'd put aside to accommodate his failures and insecurities. How much energy I'd spent protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. Without him, I flourished. I redecorated the house the way I'd always wanted. I took a cruise to the Caribbean with Dolores and 2 other friends from church. I started volunteering at a youth center, mentoring young girls who needed guidance. I took an art class and discovered I had a talent for watercolor painting. Marcus slowly worked his way back into my good graces. He came by every Sunday for dinner, and he never missed a chance to tell me he was sorry. He went to therapy to work through why he'd been so quick to choose money over family. He became a better father to his own kids, making sure they understood the value of loyalty and integrity. Jerome and Clarissa remained my rocks. They checked on me constantly, helped me with anything I needed, and made sure I knew I was loved. About 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Ernest at the grocery store. He looked terrible, thin, tired, older than his 73 years. He was living in a small apartment on the other side of town, working part-time at a hardware store to make ends meet. "Vivian," he said when he saw me, "you look good." "Thank you," I said politely. I've been wanting to talk to you, he continued, to apologize. What I did, there's no excuse for it. I was scared and selfish, and I hurt you in the worst way possible. I looked at him for a long moment. Ernest, I spent 42 years loving you, taking care of you, protecting you. And the moment you thought I was dying, you tried to rob me. That's not fear. That's not selfishness. That's cruelty. And I'll never understand it. I know, he said quietly. I don't understand it either. I threw away everything good in my life because I was too stupid and greedy to appreciate what I had. You did, I agreed. And now you have to live with that. I walked away from him in that grocery store and felt lighter than I'd felt in years. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even pity him. I just didn't care. He was no longer my problem, no longer my responsibility, no longer my concern. At church the next Sunday, Pastor Williams asked me to give a testimony. I stood up in front of the congregation and told them my story. Not all of it, but enough. I told them about betrayal and survival, about standing up for yourself even when it's hard, about the importance of knowing your worth. Sometimes, I said, looking out at the faces of people I'd known for years, the people who are supposed to love you the most will hurt you the deepest. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can let it break you, or you can let it remake you into something stronger. I chose strength. I chose dignity. I chose myself. And I'm telling every woman in here today, you deserve to be chosen too. Don't let anyone, not a husband, not a child, not anyone, make you feel like you're less than you are. The church erupted in amens and applause. Women came up to me afterward with tears in their eyes, telling me their own stories of betrayal and survival. I realized that my story wasn't just mine. It was the story of countless women who'd been underestimated, exploited, and cast aside. A year after the divorce, on a beautiful spring morning, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee and my watercolor paints. The garden was blooming, the birds were singing, and I was at peace. I thought about everything I'd been through, the fear of dying, the betrayal, the court battle, the loss, and the victory. And I realized something important. Ernest's cruelty had freed me. If he hadn't shown me who he really was, I might have spent the rest of my life taking care of a man who didn't deserve it. I might have died never knowing what it felt like to live for myself. My phone rang. It was Clarissa. Mama, I have news. I'm pregnant. I felt joy flood through me. Oh, baby, that's wonderful. I wanted you to be the first to know. And Mama, I'm going to raise my daughter to be strong like you, to never let anyone diminish her, to know her worth. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about the generations of women in my family. My mother, me, Clarissa, and now this new granddaughter. We'd all survived hardship. We'd all faced men who tried to control us or use us or discard us, but we'd all persevered. I picked up my paintbrush and started painting a portrait of strength, a woman standing tall, unbroken, free. It was the woman I'd always been inside, the woman it took 71 years and a betrayal to finally let out. Ernest had tried to take everything from me at my weakest moment. Instead, he'd given me the greatest gift of all. He'd shown me that I didn't need him, that I was enough, that I had always been enough, and that knowledge, that truth, was worth more than any house, any money, any marriage certificate could ever be. I was free, I was healthy, I was whole, and I was just getting started. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.